Thank you for coming to this session. We have 3 speakers who are each going to present for 30 minutes, and we'll take questions as we go during the presentations as opposed to at the end. Okay, we're very happy to have our first speaker, David Yang, here from Harvard. I'm going to hand it over to him.
Great, thanks for having the paper on the program. So it's very much related to the talk by Michael just now, but this is about the private market, so private VC market. We're going to talk about appropriate entrepreneurship and what's the impact of the rising of venture capitalists in China, how that's affecting the rising of entrepreneurship in the developing world. Okay, this joint work with Josh Lerner, Junxi Liu, and Jacob Moscona, who's also in the audience, who will help with all the difficult questions. Okay. So the background motivation of this research is that for a long time, global investments in entrepreneurship and innovation really is concentrated in the developed country. In fact, it's mostly concentrated in one country, which is the United States. Okay? To the extent that we think the ventures that are invested in the developed country or the technology that's been developed in the developed country are tailored to characteristics that's appropriate for a developed country, this will mean that these technology that's coming out of, or this business model that's going to come out of such process may not be the best technology, best business model for the rest of the world, especially in the developing world. Okay? A natural hypothesis of this would be, had there been a developing country that emerged as a global venture capital or entrepreneurship investment leader, this will have consequences not only going to affect the entrepreneurship and technologies coming just for that country, but it's going to potentially affect the ecosystem for the rest of the developing world. Okay? And this is the hypothesis that we're going to test empirically in this project. In particular, we're going to think about the venture capitalist, a venture market as a case, and think about sort of these entrepreneurship investments around the world as a result of a very dramatic rising of the VC market in China. Okay, so this is a picture that shows you sort of the recent history of the venture sort of investment, and especially the destination of the investments around the world. For the longest time, since the early days of the VC, which is a business model that's funded in the United States, U.S. is the basically monopoly by far of the source of the venture capitalists. Up until the early 2000s, 90% of the VC investments are geared towards business that's situated in the United States. And this has really dramatically changed in the last 10 years, where China rise, where now the venture investment is bipolar. U.S. occupies about 50% of the world's venture investment in terms of destination, and China's the 40%, and the rest of the world remains about 10%. Okay? Now, yeah. Right. So, but if you look, so 2019 is going to be sort of the peak if you think about China's sort of overall share. But if even you just take the average of the last 10 years, China remain about 35 to 40%. Okay. Now, what makes this particularly unprecedented is that this is the first and only sort of developing country that rises to this stage. And to the extent that we think the business model that may get funded or attracted by the U.S. ventures might be very different from the venture that's get funded in China, that would have potential consequences for the rest of the developing countries. Okay, and a particular mechanism that's going to make such emerging market spillover potentially plausible in the VC world is that in the venture capitalist environment, we're operating under extremely high degree of information, lack of information or uncertainty. So a lot of the venture are funded because of the existence of early benchmark. And for a long time, the benchmark for the successful business that existed only in the United States. That you can only get funding if you can say that this particular business model has worked out in the United States, and you can receive funding in the potential in your own country. Okay. Now, as China rises, it's going to potentially change some of the landscape. Now, in addition to the companies that worked out in the United States, you can also have a different set of companies that might have worked out in China. And for some of the emerging markets, they could use a different set of those benchmarks to potentially attract funding and to fund their own business. Okay? This certainly seems to be sort of pretty salient if you ask sort of the industry players, where they explicitly saying that now a lot of the Chinese business that's been receiving funding over the last 10 years has been used as a potential benchmark when they evaluate sort of business opportunities in the emerging market. Okay. One particularly salient example, and this is actually very much related to Michael's talk just now, which is the education tech sector. This is a sector that barely existed in the United States, in part because the modern brick education infrastructure in the US is fairly good, that there's no such high demand for personalized sort of ed tech sector to emerge. China had a boom in education tech sector in the mid 2010s, particularly driven by sort of a large demand of education sort of solutions in the rural sector and in the sort of the second or third tier cities. After the China's rise and receiving a huge amount of funding in the VC market in the education sector, then it has the entrepreneurs in the sector in India start to follow suit, and some of the largest players today, such as Baiju, is very much sort of a result of potentially following sort of the China's model. And this is explicitly been mentioned by the VC player that are active in the space, where they're using previously you could not get this funding to the entrepreneurs in India, but now they could because they have seen a similar business model have worked out in China. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is the Chinese government VC market, or is this like how much should we think of there also being involvement of the state as being something that's distinct between the US and China?
So we're not going to be distinguishing, for example, go back to this figure, how much of the China rise is coming from pure private VC funding, how much is coming from government-led funding. There's going to be a part of the what's going to sort of, I want you to have in mind is that you could imagine to the extent that a lot of the China sort of VC lead is going for sectors that government cared about and that not necessarily suitable for China domestically. That would limit to the extent that other emerging markets might pick this up because it's distortion even within the Chinese environment. So you can think about to the extent that we're going to find the other emerging market benefiting from the China's sort of rise, it's going to go against sort of a lot of the earlier stage potential government-driven distortive forces.
And I guess, I mean, thinking about Michael's talk with like this, thinking about the social returns, like if there's high social returns, you might still see diffusion, but just different actors involved in adoption in other settings.
Right.
But maybe that's just.
So here we're going to mostly think about sort of the ones with maybe high private returns. Yeah.
Didn't the Chinese government like destroy this huge boom and?
Yeah.
And did that destruction have any negative spillover on venture capital investment in the sector outside of China?
I'm going to come back to this at the end. Yeah, I don't have anything to show you about the collapse of some of the sectors in China. I will show you evidence about the earlier rises, but we're going to come back to this in the end.
Just a clarification question to follow up on that. How much of the VC boom in China is U.S. capital, like Sequoia, or how much is it, domestic VC funds?
It's a mixture. A lot of the earlier players were graduates of either their U.S. VC themselves or the graduates of the individuals who worked at U.S. VC firms. So that we're not going to make a strong distinction. I'm going to actually show you some evidence that a lot of this later on emerging market sort of follow-up is driven by a lot of by the local players, not just by the ones. Domestic savings. Right. So I'm talking about sort of the source of fund, right? You can think about Sequoia and then the graduates of the Sequoia funds and they start their own funds and so on. So there's certainly you can trace almost all the VCs in the world to the U.S. At some point. So there's no distinction from that perspective. Okay. So the three questions we're going to ask in this project. As China rises as a global VC investor, at least as another sort of source of potential leader compared to the U.S., does the emerging markets follow suit? In particular, does this mean that a lot of the more developing market, appropriate technology and appropriate business models and ventures gets funded because of China's rise? And what is the broader economic consequences of this? Okay. Give you a quick preview of what I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you the answer of the first question is yes. Developing market very much follows suit after China's rise, and this is particularly an area where developing market is similar in terms of the sector level suitability with China. I'm going to tell you a lot more about exactly what we mean by suitability in a second. Most of this is happening through the local investors. Most of this is happening through new firms, and many of this is happening through similar business models that you see that has become successful in China that now emerged in the emerging market again. Okay? It seems to be not sort of having a net sort of a zero effect. It actually pushed sort of a broader ecosystem of ventures because of the rise. Okay, let me show you the four sort of three pieces of data that we needed to build this analysis. The first one is that we're going to work with a pitch book data, which is by now the gold standard of the global investment. It has its issues, but this is the best available on the market. It gives you about sort of 180,000 venture deals that took place around the world in the last 2 decades. So that's going to be the baseline of the venture deals that we're going to be working with around the world. Okay. Now these 180,000 venture deals is going to link to a particular company, but not all the deals is going to be linked to a particular sector. And most of the analysis is going to be thinking about at the sector level, do sectors that worked in China start to rise also in the emerging market? So we're going to need to find a way to categorize all these deals into sectors. Okay, we're going to start with the hand-curated sector mapping that the PitchBook did, which maps about 26,000 companies into 266 sectors. So you can think about these as natural language technology is one sector, one of the 266 sectors that's under the umbrella of AI and machine learning macro sector. Okay, there's going to be 15 macro sectors and further divided into the hierarchy of 266. Surveillance and fraud detection will be, again, an example of one sector under the fintech macro sector. Okay? We're going to essentially take this 26,000 company that has mapped to these 260 sectors as a training set, and then use the machine learning to map the rest of the companies, about 440,000 of them, that have ever received any deal in the PitchBook data into these 266 sectors.
I don't want to derail it, but I'm interested why you would do it this way and not just try to compute the similarity of all the different deals and then compare similarity across the countries as opposed to doing sectors first.
So we can do that if we don't want to take a stance on exactly what's the buckets of the sectors. So that would be one way to do it. It's going to be harder in some sense. If we're going to do that, we're going to talk about sort of 440K by 440K pair. So computationally, it's going to be 2 years later, I will report maybe some. So one thing we could do is that once we have the bucket, we can look at sort of within all the companies within the sector, pairwise similarity regarding business model. I'll have something to show you on that in a bit. But that's computationally much less demanding than I'm going to do 440K pairs. Okay? Now, once we have the sector, what's going to be extremely important and relevant for the for part of the analysis is that this is going to allow us to define which of the sector China did better than the US, either in relative or in absolute term. Okay? There are going to be sectors where US by far leads in terms of the number of companies that receive the venture deals. And there are sectors, again, education tech sector is the one example I showed earlier, where vast majority of the companies who receive venture deals are Chinese companies. The US was not a big player in this. This sector may not exist had China did not emerge as a venture leader. Okay, so I'm going to define China-led sector in our baseline as the sector that has relative more deals coming from China than coming from the US companies. And we can also do this in the absolute term. The baseline results is not going to be different by which way we do that. Okay? The third empirical exercise, sort of data sort of exercise we need to do to building a lot of the source of for our identification is that we want to find a way to potentially measure country pair level, country pair by sector level, whether you're suitable, more suitable and more similar in terms of the sector suitability with China. Okay, the idea is that for companies that have certain sector that's more suitable to China and similarly more suitable to China, you might start to see a greater emergence of their local ventures following the suit of China.
That's one more clarifying.
Yeah.
Do these deals tend to get pitched in both markets, or do entrepreneurs are like either in one or the other? Like you're either doing this in China trying to find funding, or you're in the US trying to find funding. Do you ever do it in both at the same time?
So I'm going to show you. Well, I will show you on average within a sector, for example, what's the composition of the founder. But I don't know within the company what's the composition. That we can do maybe by adding compound fixed effects. That's something answer that's findable, but I don't have that on top of my head for you. Yeah. Okay, so for the country pair and by sector level suitability measure, and you can think about this as a matter how appropriate for a given sector that sort of a Chinese technology would have been for another country, especially those in the emerging market. We're going to take sort of, this is one approach. You can think about many potentially other approach. We're going to take all the World Bank's sort of development indicators as our starting point, and then we're going to assign each of these indicators to potentially multiple sectors that are relevant. So if it's about sort of education and fintech, we're going to assign any variable that's to do with education, human capital to that sector, and so on. Okay, so it's going to be M-to-M matching. That multiple sort of indicators may be matched to multiple sectors. And then we're going to standardize all this and then calculate sort of the distance across these indicators within a given sector, how different you are relative to where China stands in terms of the socioeconomic conditions before the rise of China. So this is going to be an ex-ante measure, and sort of that's going to the weighted sum, the average weighted sum across all these indicators is going to be our appropriateness or our suitability measure at the sector country pair level. Okay. I think I see another hand. Right.
How many?
So we take all the indicators and we do the matching. So we did not hand cherry picked. Yes. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I realize I think we're streaming, so we should be trying to ask questions on the mic. So was there another question? Or?
Yeah.
Well, maybe I can just shout it out while the microphone. Yeah, so you began by positing that Chinese venture firms will develop a technology that's distinctive from what's being developed in the U.S., right, because it's in a developing country. But when you designate these China-led sectors, you're just looking at sectors where the quantitative number of deals, you know, for Chinese firms is bigger than the quantitative number of deals for U.S. firms. The technology could be very similar. Is there anything in your empirical work that's trying to actually quantify the distinction or the difference in the technology being pushed by Chinese versus U.S. firms?
Right. So that's a great question. So two answers to that. One is I'm going to show you some pictures just as for now that, you know, the sectors that sort of worked in the U.S., even at the sector, you can think about this at the extensive margin, that do distinctively look very different compared to the sectors that worked in China, compared to sort of where these sectors sort of situated across the spectrum of the emerging markets. The second, I think what you're really after is that now can we define some notion of business model and measure it and see that do the business model measurement of the company that worked in China look distinctly different from the ones in the US? And that question is going to be slightly harder because if we ideally would like to compare that within the sector. I'm going to show you some evidence of that with the answer earlier. Within the sector, we can measure cross-country pair level differences in the business description. That's going to take sort of the pitch book description of the business model as the actual business model. That would be one way to do it. Another way that we're struggling of thinking about doing it would be sort of having a clearly defined sort of dimensions of business models and then actually code them and then do this to 440,000 companies, which you know, in theory is doable, but empirically is harder to implement. Yeah, but I agree with that sort of, you know, I will show you sort of a maybe more black box way of thinking about business model, but not in a more concrete way. Okay, so this suitability measure actually do capture a quite reasonable variation. So what I'm showing you here is on average across the sectors, what is the country's average level of suitability relative to China across these sectors? Okay, so what you see here is that emerging markets overall, especially the large emerging markets, are substantially more suitable on average to China. And again, probably not surprising. But what's also noted here is that China is not going to be the ones that's going to be closest to all emerging markets. You know, many sort of developing countries in Africa are not that similar in terms of socioeconomic conditions, sector by sector, compared to China. But on average, they're much more. The emerging markets are much more suitable. But that may not be the sort of the most relevant measure because the U.S. is always going to be the status quo option. So China Rising is going to offer a second sort of option for you to potentially benchmark. So what's potentially value added here is going to be the differential suitability that you can be pulled into China relative to the US. So what's shown here in this picture is the difference between the average sector level suitability between the US versus China for each country. So here you see a clear picture that most of the developed world are much closer to the United States in terms of the sector level suitability versus the developing essentially the entire emerging market. They're much closer on average to China than to the US. Okay, so this is going to be at the baseline where, as China rises, you're going to see potentially a lot more sectors that's going to be potential that's going to share a high level suitability relative to where the US stands.
So I assume you don't know what all 1,000 indicators are, but can I think of this as basically...
Jacob may know.
Yeah, maybe Jacob knows all 1,000 indicators, but can I think of this as just like the distance in GDP between the US and that country, or sorry, between China and that country?
No, so a lot of it, so in fact, and this is really what is going to give us a lot of variation, okay? Even within the same country, across sectors, you're going to have very different suitability with respect to China. So take here as two examples, agricultural technology and fintech. Right? For fintech, India ranked as the highest based on our measure about how suitable that sector is with respect to the condition of China. But India is, on average, more suitable to China relative to the US, but it's not nearly as more suitable. So we're going to use a lot of the within country across sector level variation in where it stands, and sort of that's going to essentially take out sort of the country level GDP where that will explain sort of the average differences, but it wouldn't explain all the within sector differences. Is going to be sort of India in the human in the human capital composition part is going to be closer than for example the soil suitability part. So these indicators are being allocated to the sectors. Right? We're going to take all the indicators and then we're going to allocate indicators to the sector that we think is relevant. Now, these are all done by hand by our judgment, so you can quibble about that. But it's going to be, if it's about education, we're going to assign all the human capital related indicators to education. If it's about agriculture, we're going to assign everything about crops, suitability, and those type of things to attack and so on. Okay. So let me charge on a bit and start to show you some results. Our baseline analysis is going to be a triple diff. We're going to think about sort of the countries, for country C in sector S at time t, how much investment that sector receives as a function of whether the sector was led by China. It's going to define the sector level, whether it's happened post-China rise as a global leader in that sector, and whether that sector in that country is more closely suitable compared to where the situation is in China. Okay? We can control for all the two-way fixed effects here, which is going to be that the differences in entrepreneurship, especially by country, for example, wouldn't affect our result. The trend, nation-specific trend shouldn't affect our baseline results, and global trend that's going to be specific to different sector also shouldn't affect the results. This is really going to be identified out of within country, across sector, and over time level variation. Okay? So the regression estimates that I wanted to focus on is the positive coefficient in the first two columns here. The positive coefficient here means that there's going to be a rise of sector receiving more venture funding during years after China has risen in sectors where China actually led, and in sectors where that sector is actually more closely suitable compared to China. Okay, we can do this a bit more disaggregatedly across sort of the deciles of suitability. Focus on the right-hand panel here. After the 2013, which is the year in which China sort of on average start to rise, you see that as sectors within a given country start to become more are more suitable relative to China, those sectors indeed after the post-2013 period start to receive more investment funding. This is not the case before 2013, so your sector level suitability to China, these are time invariant characteristics measured beforehand, does not predict sort of your pre-2013 investments where China was not the benchmark, it did not exist as a benchmark, the US was a benchmark. Okay? In other words, the reverse of this is that US was played as the benchmark. Right? If you have sectors that are more similarly suitable to the US, and to the extent before 2013, US is the only places where you can use as a benchmark, it's the places in emerging markets where there's a sector that's more closely similar to the United States that receive more funding. That's no longer the case in the post-2013 period, but before 2013, for the emerging markets, it's those sectors receive the funding. Now, you have to remember that on average, emerging markets have fewer of those sectors. Right? Emerging markets is going to have a lot more close to China sectors, and then they really take advantage of that after the rise. Yeah.
Super interesting, and I fully believe the results. But I'm wondering whether you could do more to think about the direction of suitability. Because one way to think about this is that if I give funding, I breed foreign competitors to my products. And that probably I don't want to do, but I may want to make them be able to build me better inputs. So I'm wondering whether you can do anything to tease out like differences between, so thinking along the value chain, from inputs to different processes.
That's a great point. In fact, this is a conversation we were just having a few days ago. I don't have anything to show you directly, but thinking about sort of the different competition motivations, thinking about how this then potentially benefit or hurt the other countries where the funding might be coming from. That's something that's certainly empirically potentially tractable, but we haven't done anything close to that. Okay. So I have 5 minutes left. I want to show you one notion about the magnitudes. I want to show you some sort of results on what we think is happening and then the broader implications. Okay? The effect here is quite sizable. Okay, 1 standard deviation increase in your sector's suitability to China triples the amount of investments that that sector receives. If you think about this in a more aggregate sense, had China not emerged as a second global VC powerhouse on top of the US, you will see 20% fewer emerging market deals overall speaking. And to the extent that emerging sort of VC deals and company backed by VC really is a disproportionately large of successful companies, this is a very sizable increase that emerging market received. And to the extent that these are happening in the sectors where the business model might be more appropriate, this could be even larger benefit to the broader ecosystem. Okay? I want to show you a few more results regarding the mechanisms. This one has come up a couple of times. We're measuring sort of business model. We can take tax of companies within a sector for each pair and think about sort of the textual similarity as a way to measure a business model. So again, take the education tag as example. Baiju and Yuan Fudao, which is two of the largest players in both China and India. Based on this textual description of the business model, they're going to be called very similar. So Baiju basically is explicitly sort of modeled after what has worked in China after Yuan Fudao. And another company in China, which is meant for a different education sector, is going to be coded correctly in this case as not as similar in terms of business model. Okay? So for the sector that if we do this as an outcome and use our baseline specification, the sectors that receive more funding, the companies that receive more funding after the rest of China in the most suitable sectors were precisely the companies that have greater textual similarity with the company in China in a sector that was funded beforehand. So it was potentially exclusively following what has worked in China and then use that similar business model in the other emerging markets. This already mentioned, most of this is coming from a variety of investors, but the lion's share of the investors were local investors. And this is not just the Chinese investors going out and do this, or US investors. Local investors played a very important role here. The final thing about sort of the mechanism is that this is not just all politics, in the sense of, to the extent that you think VC markets are somewhat efficient, it's actually screened out a lot of the sectors where Chinese government cared about, but may not be that sort of suitable even for China. It's the sector that emerged in China from a bottom-up perspective. In the early days, there will be education technology, for example, that has the biggest sort of emerging market spillover. It's not sort of the top-down strategic sector that the Chinese government particularly cared about. That has some spillover, but not nearly as much as the bottom-up version. So what does that mean for the rest of the emerging markets economy? And I want to show you 3 final evidence regarding the broader impact. The first was that this is not simply all driven by fat. Most of this company hasn't sort of really graduated in terms of IPO yet, just because this is a very recent phenomenon. But it certainly doesn't seem to be the case that all these companies that funded in the emerging markets were failed companies. Many of them were, if they ever become IPO, there's a higher fraction of them, and many of them just simply has not yet graduated. But it doesn't seem to be this all driven by failed cases. Okay. And the second sort of the broader ecosystem result I'm going to show you, which is quite sort of surprising, is that we can count whether a founder in the sector themselves is in the emerging market is a serial entrepreneur. Did they take the funding and the success business in the first sort of venture, and then basically use the reputational capital that they built for the first venture to fund another company in the future? Had the first company really was the successful one that wouldn't be funded, now that it received the funding, those entrepreneurs might have then become a serial entrepreneur. Okay? So this is precisely what we find. We find that not only do the sectors where they receive funding because they're China-led and more suitable locally, generate more serial funder, but potentially, quite importantly, these serial funders are not necessarily entering into another China-led sector. They're venturing into a sector that's not China-led, that did not have the China as a benchmark, but now potentially more locally suitable, and they use their own sort of track record to receive or attract future funding. Okay? And finally, sort of we have some firm level results that it seems to be also generating sort of a more firm in the local region where there are more Chinese led sectors to begin with. So I'm out of time. Let me sort of conclude that it seems that the rise of China as a pretty unprecedented case of a developing country become one of the global key player in venture really had spillover effects of other emerging markets, because the technology that's now not only sort of being tailored for the U.S. gets spread to the rest of the world, but technology that's spread in a developing country can also do so. It generates some interesting conceptual trade-offs, right? You might want to sort of think about you might want to concentrate a lot of the entrepreneurship and investments in the US because there's scaling effect, there's conglomeration effects. That's going to trade it off against appropriateness, that not everything that developed or funded in the US is necessarily going to be working for the emerging market, and vice versa. Not everything that's going to be appropriate for the emerging market worked in the US and hence had a US track record. Now, the final point, back to Lee's question, is that, well, the caution's tale is that as China is moving towards cracking down on technology and cracking down or using a more government sort of oriented version of directing VC, and to the extent we see that only the ones that are bottom up ventures in China get spilled over to the rest of the world, it may start to mean that we're going to see maybe fewer of such spillover effects because of what's happening domestically in China. But we don't have an answer to that yet. But in the next couple of years, this is maybe what's happening. Great. Thank you.